I'd been a trucker for about 15 years when this happened. It was 2017 and I was hauling a load through the Mojave Desert, heading into Arizona. The night was pitch black, no moon, no stars, just darkness in every direction. My headlights were dim as hell. I kept meaning to get them fixed, but you know, life happens. It must have been an hour before sunrise when I saw it. A car, dead ahead, stopped in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes, heart racing. When my truck screeched to a halt, I realized just how strange the situation was. The car's hazard lights were blinking, but the passenger door was wide open. It was parked directly on the double yellow, like someone wanted it to be seen. I'm not the kind of guy to scare easily, so I figured someone needed help. I pulled over, got out of my truck, and walked toward the car. It was quiet. Too quiet. The desert is usually alive with sounds at night, but all I could hear was the faint clicking of the hazard lights. When I got to the car, I leaned inside. It was empty. No driver, no passengers, nothing. The keys were still in the ignition and everything looked normal. That's when I started to feel it. That itch on the back of your neck, like someone's watching you. I popped the trunk, but it wouldn't budge. It was jammed, like something was holding it shut from the inside. I reached into the back seat to see if I could get it open from there. That's when I saw them. 3 black garbage bags, tied tightly with rope. I was about to reach for one of the bags when bang! The loudest gunshot I've ever heard ripped through the air. I jumped so hard, I slammed my head on the roof of the car. My hands were shaking as I turned around. There he was, a short, stocky guy with red hair, wearing overalls and shin-high boots. In one hand, he held a small shovel. In the other, an old hunting rifle. He didn't look crazy, just off. We locked eyes for a second and he started yelling something, waving his hands, but I wasn't sticking around to find out what he wanted. I ran back to my truck, fired it up, and floored it. As I drove away, I watched in the mirror as he ran after my truck for a few seconds before sprinting back to his car. A few minutes later, I saw headlights in the distance behind me, coming up fast. He was honking, flashing his lights, tailgating me. I called the cops, praying they'd get there in time. After what felt like forever, I finally saw flashing police lights ahead. The guy veered off the road and disappeared into the desert. I try not to think about it too much, but I'll tell you this. I don't stop for anything in the desert anymore.
I was a few miles down the road when I started hearing this strange noise, like rustling, coming from behind me. I glanced in my rearview mirror, and that's when I saw it. The curtain in the sleeper cab was moving. My blood ran cold. At first, I thought it might have been the wind or something, but I didn't have the AC on. My hands were sweating on the wheel, and I didn't know what to do. If someone was back there, I was trapped. The highway was empty. No lights, no cars, just me, my truck, and whatever was behind that curtain. I punched nearest police station into my GPS and floored it. The 20 minutes it took to get there felt like hours. My heart was racing, and every time I heard a creak or a shuffle, I thought whoever or whatever was back there was about to attack me. As soon as I pulled into the station, I jumped out and ran inside, shouting for help. The cops must have thought I was crazy, but they surrounded my truck in minutes. When they opened the sleeper cab, well, let's just say I'll never forget what they found. Inside the sleeper cab were 3 people, 2 men and 1 woman. They were wearing filthy clothes, wrapped in blankets, and one of the men was armed with switchblades. I don't know how long they were back there or what they were planning, but I'm glad I trusted my gut. That abandoned gas station? That's where they must have climbed in. I shudder to think what could have happened if I hadn't gone to the cops right away. I'd been pushing myself hard that week, more hours than I should have been driving, and barely any sleep. It was past midnight, and I was just about to pull off the highway when I saw something strange up ahead. At first, I thought it was just road debris, a tarp or something. But as I got closer, I realized it was a dress. A purple dress, just lying there in the middle of the road. I slowed down, thinking maybe I was seeing things. But it was real. About 200 yards later, I saw a pair of shoes. That's when I started to freak out. I parked and stepped out into the cold night air. I walked up to the pile of clothing, keeping my eyes on the woods around me. It looked like kids' clothes, tiny shirts and shoes. I remember thinking, this isn't right. Just as I turned back to my truck, I heard it, a crunching sound coming from the trees. I whipped my head around, trying to see what made the noise. A few seconds later, I heard another crunch, this time from the other side of the road. I wasn't sticking around to find out what it was. I bolted back to my truck. My brain was screaming at me to drive away, but I couldn't. What if there really was a kid out there? Before I could make a decision, I heard the scream again, exactly the same as the first one, like a recording on a loop. I pointed my headlights at the sound, and that's when I saw them. Crouched behind the trees. One of them was holding a massive speaker, playing the sound of a screaming child. I didn't wait to see what they'd do next. As I turned back to the road, I heard something hit the side of my truck, hard. When I looked in my rearview mirror, I saw one of them running after me, throwing rocks. Another one hurled something that cracked my passenger side window. I drove the rest of the way in silence, hands shaking on the wheel. I called the cops as soon as I could, but they didn't find anyone when they searched the woods. To this day, I don't know who those people were or what they wanted, but I do know one thing: I'll never stop on a lonely road again.